Thanks, everyone. Hi. Right then, just to start, I realise on the agenda it said the groundbreaking research of the BSA to a room of researchers. That's a pretty bold claim, isn't it? So we'll see. I might live or die by the sword on this one, but hopefully you'll find some of what follows interesting. I also want to have a conversation with Maggie afterwards, because some of what you've just said tallies exactly with the research that we've done and the work that we're looking to do in the future. So the BSA Group is a charity. It's 4.5 years old, just about, and we were set up by Danielle Obey and 3 other co-founders to be a bit of a bridge between the sector as they saw it and the communities, often disenfranchised, who aren't benefiting. So regardless of which statistics you want to look at, whether it's children, whether it's adults, whether it's focused on workforce, general participation, open water, there are some huge inequalities and inequities there. And we really wanted to start a conversation around, well, how do we change that? How do we bring more partners from the sector across that bridge to work with us? And what sort of research do we need to do to fill in some of the knowledge gaps that exist as well? And I've been very fortunate, having had that initial conversation with Danielle 4 years ago, quite soon after launch. It was clear that there was a real opportunity for us to start filling some of those knowledge gaps, and I'll present some of that here today. One of the things I will reference unashamedly, and hopefully we can come back and present it at a future session of this, is the physiology research, or we're calling it float research, that we're doing with Heather, Professor Mike Tipton at the University of Portsmouth, as well as the RNLI. And that's hopefully going to be of real interest in terms of highlighting why people from ethnically diverse communities can learn to find their float. Everyone can be taught to float. It might not be that we all float in the traditional way, whatever that might be. So we'll look forward to hopefully coming and presenting that work in the future. There's lots of other research that we're doing, but I'm going to focus today on one specific area. I'll probably run out of time knowing what I'm like with a microphone in front of me to talk about anything else. And this was the water safety research that we did a couple of years ago now. We did it with 1,000 children, so 500 were primary age school children and 500 were secondary. We did it with a research agency, DJS, and we made sure that it was nationally representative, whilst we'd also allowed weighting for ethnicity, so we had sufficient audiences to enable us to do the analysis you'll see. I'll go on to the next slides. Apologies, there's a few stats on the next slides, but the visuals won't compare to what you've seen already. I think hopefully the message is quite powerful. So we found from doing the research that 90% of children said they can swim. The big question I have is, can they? This is their claimed behaviour, so that we're not doing tests to assess them in pool or in open water. We're just asking them, look, can you swim? You start scratching the surface and talking to them. There's a very clear questionnaire that we pulled together with some of our partners on this. And then you start to find out that actually goes towards, 57% of children said they could swim 25 metres, or at least 25 metres, without stopping. When you start scratching the surface further, there are inequalities for ethnically diverse children and those from lower socioeconomic groups as well. And it was interesting that 37% of the children claiming to be confident in open water actually could not, even from their claim, their perception, could not necessarily swim a length without stopping. And one of the things that we want to do more research on in the future is this whole piece around confidence or overconfidence, the aquatic skills that they may or may not have, and their water safety knowledge. And this research for us was a little bit of a line in the sand to understand, well, what are we dealing with here? What are the challenges? And also where can we start to develop interventions as well. Because it's all right doing research. We need research not just in terms of future applications for research, but also applications for practice and what's happening in pools as well. When we started to break it down by demographics, apologies, there's a lot of data there on one slide, but some of the biggest discrepancies were when you started asking for much more technical sets of skills. So I can swim on the spot in deep water, so treading water in essence. I can stop in deep water, shout for help and swim again. And you see some huge differences, not just from primary to secondary level, as you might expect, but also for socioeconomic group, and as importantly, by ethnicity. Because one of the questions we had when we were embarking upon the research was, well, hold on, why the BSA looking at this? Is this of relevance to you? And often we have to justify our role, our space in the room. Confidence in open water was quite interesting. 76% of children said they were confident in the swimming pool. That dropped to 50% in open water. And fewer said that they would know what to do if they got into trouble, or they would be able to help someone or know what to do, rather, if they saw someone else in danger. We also asked, is there anything that has affected your confidence in swimming over the past year? And the quotes there are just a flavour of the feedback that we had. A lot of comes back to one of Maggie's points. The BSA also do a lot of pool-based activities with communities to help them overcome potential trauma and things that might have happened at school. Some awful examples of being thrown into a pool or being vilified for their lack of skills or not being able to float, actually would resurface 20, 30, 40 years later and be real barriers, complex barriers to engaging in any form of aquatic activity. And it was really interesting what you were saying earlier, Maggie, around that trust, that support in terms of the activators and the people in the water with our audiences is absolutely fundamental. We worked with the RNLI in terms of the ascertaining the children's knowledge of the water safety code. And they developed 4 multiple choice questions, which they've used and have pressure tested over the years to understand, are people aware of the dangers? Do they know the code in essence? 75% hadn't heard of it. Actually, confession time, I worked at Swim England. Let's see, Kerry's here as well. I worked there for 6 years. And a large number of those years, I wasn't really aware of it either. It's embarrassing. As the governing body, how visible is it? We talk about the Green Cross Code, we talk about the Fire Safety Code. How prevalent is the Water Safety Code as well? So a large part of our work as the BSA is not just in helping develop the skills for children and adults from ethnically diverse communities, but it's also the knowledge. It's to make sure that we're giving them that joy, that fun that Maggie talked about, and building into that a basis of not putting themselves at risk, but actually having joy, having fun, and having a life of aquatic activity. So although the majority of children didn't actually have much knowledge at all around the Water Safety Code, there was a large latent demand. 73% wanted to know more, which is a bit of a relief given low levels of information. You can see a couple of the quotes there of people of children who had correctly understood one or more elements of the code. Again, there's a lot of data here, but we pulled together those 4 scenarios into a composite measure. So are the children knowledgeable or not, in essence? So we've already captured information on their aquatic skills or their claimed aquatic skills. We've got a little bit in terms of their open water confidence. Now we're asking about the knowledge. And again, you can see it's not just aquatic skills that are starting to split out by socioeconomic group or by ethnicity. It's also water safety knowledge. One of the other things was this challenge of people being competent. And there was a huge number, So we've got 51% of those who could swim 25 metres or more, who said, actually, I'm not quite sure in terms of the water safety, so would they be putting themselves at risk? And what we did was we crunched all of this together. I won't bore you with the details, probably because I don't know it, but there's a lot of an algorithm behind the scenes that then created a water safety index. And this was a way that we wanted to create of having a conversation, but also being able to put the right interventions in place with communities. We're talking and working with schools about this as well, where we could say, look, what are the risk levels here? What are the potential? What's the discrepancy here between the audience's knowledge, their aquatic skills? So we crunched the numbers, and this is what we found off the back of 1,000 school children. You see the overall headline of 58% were higher risk. And what we want to do now is work closely, and we're working with schools in the London area. We're going to expand this to South Wales, so we've already got a small footprint of activity around Cardiff and Swansea, but also into the Black Country, because again, being a small charity, we can't be everywhere. We'd like to be in major cities, certainly interested in a conversation about Bristol as well. But actually, yeah, it's really important to us to understand what are those discrepancies. And actually what it's led to, even though our name is Black Swimming Association, is that every child should have the right to have the knowledge and to have the aquatic skills by the time they leave primary, never mind by the time they're well into their secondary lives. Because without those, we know that there are issues in terms of their likelihood to swim, whether in a pool or in open water in the future. I was going to talk about our swim story, but actually Maggie articulated some of the themes that came out of it much better than I could as well, and I'm aware of time, so a couple of minutes left. We did do a piece of work that, again, it echoes what Maggie said. It was with a large number of adults, this was, so 1,000 surveys, and we had over 400 qualitative interactions with people from predominantly Black and Asian backgrounds to understand what their swimming journeys were like. There's a link, we can send a link to the research afterwards, but there were some really interesting learnings there that have helped us to develop the in-pool interventions to help build those swimming skills and the water safety. We're not quite 8-week, but we have a 5-week programme called Together We Can that again is in those locations I mentioned earlier. I'd be very happy to talk to any of you about that in more detail if you want to at a breakout session later. I'll leave it there. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I worked on the Swim Safe campaign just up the lake, which was a partnership between Swim England and the RNLI. One thing we saw with that was parental role modelling was a really interesting part of children swimming, if you will. And I'm just conscious with the previous presentation as well. So how do we combat that when parents can't swim?
Yeah.
And then they're not able to to bring the children to environments like this, because we're surrounded by lakes, seas, and rivers here, and it was an issue for us.
100%.
Just repeat the theme of that question.
Sorry. Yeah, it was around. So you work on Swim Safe. And it was understanding the dynamic of parents and maybe paying it forward to children or not through the lens of ethnicity. It's something that we want to do more research on. So on one of the initial slides, we talk about a children's research project going forward. I want to understand what it is to be able to swim. When do people know that they can swim? From the perspective of the child, the parent, carer, guardian, the swimming teacher as well. Because one of the things that we learnt with our swim story was actually, depending on whether the parent can swim or not, there's a massive correlation between whether or not the child will get the same opportunities. And sometimes it's only when the child learns through school, it's not always, but sometimes when they're learning through school, the parent will suddenly go, hold on a minute. and it pays back in reverse. So the parent and one of the co-founders of the BSA, Ed Akura, who's done the Blacks Can't Swim films, he did this. He started learning to swim because his children were in, and he didn't want them to have all those wonderful activities without him being part of it as a family.
Thank you. Riffing off that question and speaking to Maggie's presentation just before, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role where there's trauma for individuals who have, say, crossed the water as refugees, and how that shapes experiences also through the generations and generational trauma of individuals swimming.
I think it's a really good question. So it's about the sort of the trauma linking to what Maggie was talking about, that people, whether they're children or adults, might attend sessions or not, and the reasons why they might have for that. Gosh, where do you start? I'm not going to have time to do it justice. I think a lot of the work that we've been doing practically has been within communities. So when you said co-create with, don't do to, a lot of communities have had things where funding streams will come in and there's great intentions, and we suddenly start looking at it and go, all right, okay, we can talk to this group and we'll do the best thing ever, and actually the money runs out and there's no sustainability to it. And one of the things that we're trying to do is say there has to be a permanence, and this conversation with funders is quite difficult because they're used to little pilot projects here, there and everywhere. There's no funders in the room, are there? But that's the nature of the beast almost, that they're used to small-term interventions when actually it needs the communities. This isn't the whole thing, but it's part of the jigsaw, is for you to walk with them and swim with them and be in the pool with them in a way that maybe isn't how normal or standard learn to swim takes place, but then you're building that trust so that if you understand their history, and you've, as Maggie was saying, you've been on training in terms of being trauma informed, etc., you can then take the right approach to not just taking them out of the situation if they need it, but giving them the right support in a way that we've found they've had experiences in swimming pools potentially with standard learn swim programs that just haven't been personal enough to their needs and their requirements. So it's a very naff answer to a very complex issue.
Just a short question.
Just short. I'll abbreviate the question. I heard that schools now don't have to provide swimming. There's been some change. Was that a misinformation or is that true?
They don't need to provide swimming.
Swim lessons in school?
It's on the curriculum.
Yeah,
so,
someone told me they've taken it off.
In Wales, they might have, but then they've flipped it. I think my last understanding of it was that water safety was mandated, but not necessarily getting in the pool. One of the whole points, it just brings us right back to the Water Safety Index. You can only be safer, you're never low risk, but lower risk, if you've got the skills and if you've got the knowledge. Without one or the other, there's a massive gap, and that's why we want to say, and this is where you start trying to influence policy, you've got to get both right. Okay, thanks very much.